Good evening all, hope you're good. Just going to do a little Q&A on your health and fitness questions that you got and some of the ones that you put over in the Facebook group. So if you've got any questions and you haven't already asked them, just pop them below and I'll try and get to them in this video. So first and foremost, just want to say congratulations to all of those people who've been doing events today. Really cool to see all those people doing well. So people like Kit Davis done really well in his half marathon in Bideford, also Kay and Dan Kimber and all of our friends like Charlene and people like that. So fantastic, good on you, and Dave in South Africa doing his cycle ride. So yeah, anybody else who I haven't seen what they've been up to, great work. So yeah, so just move my camera a bit just so I can see the questions on the other screen. So no particular order, so I'm going to go through some of the questions. So Kate said what and when to eat for breakfast, and I was sort of like, well, yeah, what in what respect? So it was actually in terms of like if you're running a half marathon. So one of the key things to remember is that when we're running a half marathon, unless we're going to take more than 2 hours, which you could do, then there's a fair likelihood that you're not going to need anything sort of more than what you consume for breakfast in the morning of. So if you're going to be a bit longer, then you might want to consider taking some gels or some other kind of foods, or with you, gels pretty good because they're low in fibre and they get into the bloodstream pretty quickly. So if you can't tolerate them, then you just kind of have to come up with your own sort of alternatives. So breakfast on the morning of, I would say you don't really want to eat much after sort of 2.5 hours before the race, because when you're running, obviously what you don't want is the blood going to your digestive system when you're trying to get the blood to the muscles and supply the energy to those. So timing wise, if I had a 10:30 race, I'd honestly try not to eat my main meal before that, anything later than 8 o'clock, because you kind of want it to go digest, and obviously what you choose then is really important. So in that morning of a race like that, I wouldn't be eating anything that's kind of fairly high in really high in protein and fibre necessarily on that particular morning. So say something like a steak, like you wouldn't have a steak before, or anything that's fatty that takes a lot of digestion. So if you think about like bacon and those kind of things, they're probably not the sort of thing you'd eat on the morning of a race, a running race anyway. So what to eat? So it's a combination really of something that's going to give you sustainable energy, something like oats. Now I appreciate that oats are not necessarily what everybody likes to eat or can eat, but something like oats with something else like some sort of form of protein. And if you can tolerate eggs are absolutely brilliant because they get into the blood. They get into there very easily digested, very biologically available to the body, and also they actually give you some good fats, but not too much. So eggs and oats and banana, pretty good in terms of overall balance. So you're getting some minerals and stuff from the eggs and also from the banana, which will help potassium particularly in there. So that's what I would say. Like kind of those combinations, low fibre fruit. You don't want to be eating things that are like kind of really chewy at that time of morning. You just want to get something in there that's going to fuel you for the day, and then you can obviously eat your main meals, if you like, your veggies and all that sort of stuff afterwards. So that's the half marathon. When and what? Right, next question. Nutrition prior, during. Okay, so a bit more specific there. Okay, so triathlon, standard triathlon. I'll be away from home routine. So for me, it's how to fuel beforehand and what should I have for breakfast. Okay, so I've probably just answered that in that previous question because they're very, very similar. Okay, will I need gels for that distance? So for a standard distance triathlon, for those of you who don't know, so it's a 1,500 metre swim. It's around 24 miles of cycling. And then you can expect to do something around 10 kilometres, so 6 miles of running. So that in itself, for most of us, unless you're called Johnny Brownlee or someone like that, is going to take us more than 2 hours. Okay, so we're going to need some fuel during that time. And the fitter we are and the more adapted we are to using fuel during during training. Obviously, the longer we can go without. Now, when you start entering the realms of longer distances, what you can't do is try and catch up. Okay, so what you do need to do when you're doing your triathlon is start thinking about your nutrition, probably within half an hour of the bike. Yeah, so you come out of the water, you're on your bike, your heart rate's come down, and you're onto the cycling. Okay, and you're just letting your heart rate come down, settling, and then you can start your nutrition. Okay, so will I need gels for that distance? Quite possibly, yes. Any solid foods you eat, I recommend you obviously try and eat during the bike, and probably stop eating that a little way away from the run. So let's say that your bike is going to be, I don't know, let's just say for argument's sake, it's going to be an hour, 45 minutes. I'd probably stop eating anything solid, and that doesn't include gels because they're not really solid, at about an hour 15. So it gives you half an hour before you start running. When you take on your last solid feed, and that'll just help ease digestion, and just when you start running it's just more comfortable. Okay, so that's that. After the event, when you're on a high, do you go blow out or stay sensible? So to be honest with you, that's a good question. I think it all depends on how you feel at the end. Sometimes I have good intentions, if you like, of having a little blowout after a big race or a big goal, if you say, and actually just don't feel like it. So just go with how you feel. Probably it's safe in the knowledge that you've burnt enough calories that you don't need to worry too much about that, and hopefully it doesn't turn into like an all day the next day, and you get back on it the next morning. So the meal afterwards, I think it's important that you think about what nutrients you're putting back in, because obviously you've created quite a lot of trauma during that triathlon, Janet. So I'd be seriously thinking about trying to get some nutrients back in. But I probably wouldn't worry about how much. I'd probably just eat as much as you like, and kind of so long as you feel good with it. I know that after the triathlon we did in New Zealand, there were certain things in there that I got given which I didn't really want to eat, and there were certain things I thought I'd fancy which I didn't really want to eat. So enjoy yourself at the end of that triathlon. Graham, okay, when it's gym day and your legs are knackered from a long ride/run the day before, is it best not to do legs at all, or still do legs and crack on but cut back on the weight and reps? So good question. So with the when you're trying to train for triathlon and you're trying to train for some cycling or running events, strength and conditioning is massively important. Okay, possibly if you're doing a triathlon, it's probably the fifth discipline. So you've got swim, bike, run, nutrition, and then probably your strength and conditioning. So those 5 aspects, put aside sleep and your hydration and all that sort of stuff in your lifestyle. The strength and conditioning is really, really important. So it's a massive consideration during your week. So you need to look at your week and think, right, probably need to start planning my week a little bit differently. Personally, doing a strength session, like if it was a lower body strength session, I'd be tempted, Graham, to put that somewhere nearer your swim. Just on the basis that at least then you're getting a little bit of recovery. So, perhaps if it was a swim and then the next day was strength and conditioning, or if it was the other way around, so you did strength and then the next day you did your swim, just to give yourself a little bit of a break. I think if you got to go to the gym at that point, then you just have to kind of listen to your body. I'd always start with a good little mobility sequence to do at the start of that. It's not that you shouldn't do legs at all, but you probably need to think about, so if you've just been running, you probably then the next day don't need to be doing anything that sort of involves any jumping activities. Probably want to think about the type of exercises you're doing, and whether or not you could actually then do some upper body. And some core work, and whether or not you benefit more from that. After a long ride and those sorts of things, the movement and the blood flow that you get from doing strength exercises, irrespective of the weight, will actually help you recover. So in terms of what you should do that day, you have to listen to your body. I'd always start with mobility and see how you feel at the end of that. Cut back on the weights if you need to, but also perhaps use the opportunity to work on other areas of the body, because some strength work for the core and the upper body is never going to hurt you if you're doing triathlon anyway. So probably listen to that and see how you go. Nicky, my question is really about after the event. Hopefully that's allowed. Of course it is. What can you do, exercise, mobility, stretching, rollering wise, to speed up DOMS recovery after a race? And can you ever completely get rid of it, or is it a question of time and managing it? Okay, so for those of you who don't know what DOMS is a delayed onset of muscle soreness. And it's actually caused by a few things, but mainly to do with what goes on inside the muscle cell itself. So when we exercise, the muscle fibres have cross bridges, and when we overexert or we stretch those muscles beyond their normal capacity, whether it be duration or intensity, shall we say, those cross bridges will tear. Okay, and that's what gives you that soreness the next day, and it's all to do with where the calcium attaches to the end of the muscle on the real microscopic level, and you basically get soreness as a result of that breakdown reaction there. So, DOMS, what can you do about it after a race? Personally, just rehydrate to start with, so make sure you rehydrate it, because obviously a lack of electrolytes in the cell will not help with getting rid of any other byproducts of the exercise. So first and foremost, that. I think movement is key, so walking, encouraging blood flow, particularly in the lower limbs. So although scientifically the jury's out in terms of compression, I'd also suggest that if you can get some compression, just to help with lymphatic drainage as well, so away from the sort of more distal areas of your body. So that would be a good idea. Massage is really good, because obviously that aids in that. Sometimes you're a little bit too sore the day after. Sometimes it's better the day after. That makes sense. So if you compete on a Saturday, sometimes you're almost better off actually having your massage on, say, the Tuesday. On the Monday. So it's complete Saturday, massage Monday, complete Sunday, massage Tuesday, because obviously then the therapist can get a little bit more work into your legs, if it is your legs that's mainly sore. So that's what I would do there. You really can't, but again, the benefit of the massage really comes in making sure that you're hydrated as well. So I would do that. Foam rollering, yeah, again, helps with recovery from that, and in terms of, again, just almost like a massage. So I would do that. Questions, make sure I'm answering those. Yeah, and then I think the mobility side of things just really comes down to specific areas that are tight. So if you felt your legs, particularly on the adductors or on the hip flexors or whatever you might well have felt during that, if you cramp there, you can pretty much guarantee that later on that night or the day after or the day after that, or even into the week after that, you're going to feel pretty sore there. So foam rollering and particular attention to those areas is a good idea, helping with that recovery. I think as well, it's probably good to remember that during this period of time in your recovery, particularly if it's a really long event, I would suggest that you consider your recovery not just on how you feel right now, but think about over the week, because sometimes the adrenaline will carry you forwards and can actually leave you feeling on a bit of a high the day after, and you think, oh, I feel okay, and then you start planning on doing things later in the week, or when really you need to give yourself a bit of time. Having a massage 2 days after the event, I think, will give you a good idea of kind of how you're going, but also will help speed up that recovery. So find yourself a good sports therapist and get them involved as much as you can. All right. Any other part of that question I haven't really answered? Can you ever completely get rid of it? No. I think the nature of intense exercise beyond your limits, and that can happen in a gym as well, like a gym environment. So if you're doing a weight you've never done before for a number of reps you've never done, or an exercise you've never done, sometimes even with the lightest weight possible, even your own body weight, you can really feel that. So you can alleviate those things by foam rolling, massage, hydration, stretching, and paying particular attention to the areas that you felt were really tight during the event, if they did get tight, and or areas that are weak. All right, hope that answers that. Okay, Liam, let's have a little look at this question. So, question about maintaining / improving muscle mass whilst trying to lose fat. Often heard do one or the other. I've also heard you can do both if you're in a positive nitrogen balance. Okay, so quite possibly, yes, if you are in a positive nitrogen balance, you can. There are more things that contribute towards gaining muscle mass at the time. But having a positive nitrogen balance is one of those. But also making sure you're in a calorie surplus, because gaining muscle mass is expensive to the body. So you need to when you're trying to gain muscle, you need to think about this whole thing as being what we call anabolic. So obviously catabolic being breaking down and anabolic being building up. So it's all to do with hormones. Now, when you think about hormones, because hormones kind of govern everything that we will do when it comes to gaining muscle mass. So when you eat too much sugar, okay, that will naturally suppress testosterone. Okay, so when you're trying to gain muscle mass, it's really important that the carbohydrate sources you choose are perhaps a little more towards the starchy carbohydrates, vegetables, those kind of things, rather than the sort of more refined sugary things like pasta, rice, those sorts, white rice, those sorts of things. But you still need to make sure that you're hitting so you need to know if you're getting that surplus of calories, okay? And you can do that by working out your basal metabolic rate, so that will tell you where you're at, and then you can multiply that by a certain number, depending on your daily activity level, and that will tell you how many calories you need, okay? From there, then you need to start working out what percentage of those calories you're going to eat are going to be protein, carbohydrates, and fats, okay? And work out, and then you need to start measuring that. So you need to know, okay, so this is what I ate, this is my weight, this is what I did training wise, and then you start diarising it and you start working towards that goal. If you're really serious about gaining muscle, so hopefully that sort of helps you understand that you do need to underpin your muscle mass fat loss goal with solid nutrition, and that really governs the hormones which govern everything else. So that's what I would be doing there. To go back to your question exactly, can I lose body fat whilst gaining muscle mass? I think depending on where you're at in your training, I think yes you can, but depending on where so if you're really out of condition, you think you are carrying way too much body fat, I think it's very possible for you to lose body fat and gain muscle mass at the same time to a greater degree than perhaps, say, if you were down to, say, 10% body fat and you were trying to gain muscle mass and lose body fat at the same time there. I think the style of training you would then be doing would probably dictate sort of where you go. Now, if you think about somebody who is doing bodybuilding or something like that, when they get towards the end of their training, a lot of it is more about just reducing the body fat, okay, rather than building the muscle mass. So what they tend to do is go muscle mass, build the bulk first whilst the calories are high, and then gradually reduce the calories and actually then work their way down towards reducing body fat at that time. So you can learn a lot from what people do who are successful at what they've done. That kind of analogy, that kind of thing is losing body fat, gaining muscle mass at the same time. You tend to see more of the bodybuilders doing that very, very successfully. And you see other people doing it well too. It's very individual as to what works for somebody. I think you really need to get an eye on your calories, though, if that's something you seriously want to do. Alrighty, so Dave, day before a cycle event, food, workout, sleep. To be honest with you, the cycle event, day before, nothing too heavy on the legs. Get off the legs, rest them. Sleep, just do what you normally do. You need to think about your pre-bed routine, because obviously you're probably going to be a bit more nervous than usual. So just thinking about what you're doing there. Give some thought to it. When I say pre-bed routine, I mean, right. So don't go on, social media if you've got an event I'm sometimes I find it actually just a nice distraction. I just talk to my friends and that sort of stuff. But if it's something that's going to aggravate you, I wouldn't go on it. Don't watch the news. Don't watch the 10 o'clock news. Workout, no, definitely wouldn't be doing too much training the day before an event like that, Dave. Food, don't try anything you've not tried before. But specifically, it's generally something that kind of makes you feel energised. Now, for some people, like the gentleman behind me on the thing, we know that he functioned really well eating fish the night before an event. So, something like that, something quite light, normally good for the brain, good for the digestive system, works quite well. Yeah, so I think that kind of answers that. It's kind of nothing too far outside of what you normally do for a day before a cycle event. Andy, how good / bad is this stuff? Just had some. Okay, so it's whole earth smooth peanut butter. If I'm right in thinking that has palm oil in it, that's that stuff, Andy. So Burke. So yeah, probably not that good. Although you probably want to send me the other side of that that particular jar of peanut butter. So peanut butter's okay, but it's the fats are not particularly good. It's very acidic. So I personally prefer almond butter or something like that because it's alkaline. It's got better mineral content in it, vitamin E. Vitamin E is really important for cell structure. So if you do a lot of training, so I know you're training for a marathon, Andy. So if you do a lot of training, you have quite a high cell turnover. So vitamin E is really important in that. It's important in the cell, in the development of the cell wall. So I'd be thinking about almond butter as an alternative, that mate. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Strained my calf running and missed a few weeks of a 17-week marathon program. Where do you join back in without overdoing it or being behind in your training? Okay, so this is a really good question actually, and it's relevant to most of us who train. More often than not, 90% of the time, I'd say it's probably best not to try and catch up if you've got a structured program. So don't try and go back and try and squeeze in extra sessions. That rarely works. Normally creates more stress than it's worth. You under recover. Missed a few weeks of a 17-week. So what you got to think about is obviously, so if you miss a few weeks of a 52-week program, probably not the end of the world. If you miss a few weeks of a 17-week program, you need to then think about where you go back in. Possibly not even where you were when you finished. So if you had said incident on say week 12, you need to think about what impact the training you're going to do between now and the event is going to have on that, but also think about what you psychologically want to achieve before you run, so that you feel like you've kind of done some work. So at that point, then I think that's where the plan needs to be flexible, and you need to look at the plan and go, right, well, I know that this weekend I was meant to be doing 16, the weekend after I was meant to be doing 18, and then the weekend after I was meant to be doing 20, and then it was back to 18. You need to look at that and go, right, where would be a happy medium? I probably ought to start back somewhere a bit easier than when I finished, just so that I get back into it. But at that point, Andy, I'd probably say you need to look at that plan because that's no longer the plan, really. In many ways, you need to adapt that plan to suit your injury that you've just had, whatever it may be, and then you can build forward from that. All right. So yeah, don't try and squeeze everything into to a time period as a result of that. Liam, another question. So how long a rep should it last? So concentric, isometric, eccentric, depending on if you're training for power, strength, building lean muscle, endurance. Kind of aimed at some of our shearing and training stuff like the dumbbell comp. Okay, so really good question. Liam's an awesome client of mine who I coach for. He's sheep shearing, and so we've taken him from someone who didn't really train like that properly to someone who's now he's like his training is on it, and so he's asking a really good question about sort of how long should each repetition or each exercise. So say we're doing a press up, how long should it last? So each phase of it. So how long should it last going down? How long should it last going up? And the pause phase of the press up. So really good question. In terms of power, so you won't tend to find like if you're doing power, you won't tend to find that kind of timing, Liam, on a sort of the concentric, isometric, eccentric, because it's so fast. Because power in essence is speed times force, so you're trying to move the weight as fast as you can. It's trying to move an object from say the ground to above your head as fast as possible. So there's very little emphasis, if you like, on the concentric, isometric, eccentric, because it's just so fast. If you're doing something for strength, and building muscle tissue, because that's what time and attention was geared towards, then then you're looking at, you know, ranges of sort of 2 seconds lowering, 2 seconds up. But you can play around with that. You know, I've had people doing 1 second up, 1 second pause, 1 second down, 1 second pause, and then go again. You know, we've played around with it where it's 4 seconds lowering, 2 seconds on the way up, because as we know, the eccentric phase of an exercise, the lowering phase, is where you tend to create or you can generate most force. It's not where most of us feel strongest, but that's where most sort of effort, if you like, goes through the muscle tissue, and that's how we can really grow and we can really improve our strength. So, for instance, on an exercise like pull-ups, not everybody can do a pull-up, so pulling themselves right up to the top of the bar. But most people, when you put them up on the pull-up bar, you can let them lower themselves. So that's the eccentric phase of the exercise, Liam. And that's another example of a way to train that. So, endurance-wise, again, you know, probably, like, in the grand scheme of if you were doing a linear progression, like, you know, like you're saying, so muscular strength, endurance, and then, you know, strength, and, you know, sort of then moving towards power, that sort of linear progression, it's during the strength phase that you would really see those repetitions and the timings of them that I've just talked about come into play. So that's how that works. The complexes that we're doing on that program, for those of you who don't know what a complex is, it's basically a series of exercises. So using one object, whether it be a barbell or a dumbbell or a med ball or a kettlebell, we just don't let go of the object. Really, really good way of getting the cardiovascular benefit without having to spend time on a treadmill, and also kind of killing two birds with one stone, because you're doing the strength work at the same time as doing the cardio work. So the complexes are great. You know, we normally go between 3 and 6 exercises, and we start at the bottom, we work our way up to the top, and then maybe back down the other side if it's single arm exercises or single leg. If it's just straight barbell, we'll generally start with the weight on the floor, so something like deadlifts into bent over rows, hang cleans, front squat, press, good mornings, bent over rows, you know. So we'll tend to use the object, start with it on the floor and work our way up. So that's the complexes that Liam's on about. They really fit into, you know, to the kind of muscular strength endurance, and not absolute strength builders, because it's so tiring on the body, especially once you get to the weight above the head. Okay, so yeah, definitely aspects of that that you could use, Liam, within a strength training program. But for someone like you, you'll see that during a particular session rather than a complex, I'd say. All right. Okay, so if there's anyone watching, any other questions, let me know. I'm just going to double check back through the original post. If you get a question, you want to put it below, that's absolutely fine. I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. But hopefully that's answered a few of your questions anyway. Yeah, no, I think that's it. Oh, injury prevention, Francesca. So, injury prevention, I mean, I did ask what in particular. As a rule, one of the best things you can do, one of the things that most people don't think about in terms of injury prevention, particularly for someone who's doing more like endurance type activity, is sleep. You read a lot of studies recently going into like sleep and the benefit of having naps, and I know that's not necessarily geared, I don't know whether it's geared towards your specific question, Francesca, but injury prevention, start with sleep, hydration and recovery between sessions. So that's kind of for more like sort of from the endurance perspective. But from a general overall perspective, I think it's listening to your body and differentiating between muscle soreness, which you do develop an awareness of that when you train a bit more, versus sort of neural, you know, and sort of any sharp pains you may feel. So think about, like, you know your body better than most people. Obviously, you can ask questions of the professional, which is fine, but you need to start differentiating between what sorts of pain you may be feeling. Injury prevention as a whole, strength work, massage, hydration, nutrition, all come into play. Underhydrated, you're likely to strain. Weak, you're likely to fall over. You're likely to trip. You're likely to go beyond ranges of movement you're capable of. So nutrition if you're eating highly inflammatory and acidic foods, that's going to have an impact. So sleep we've already mentioned. So hopefully with those things there in place, and then obviously you've got to think about your own mobility. So if you know you're particularly tight in an area, or if you say you spend a lot of time sat down driving or at a desk because that's your job, then you need to then think about undoing that before you start trying to run. So what we can't expect to do now is to perhaps be sat down like this all day, and then go out and run as well as everybody else used to do when we were doing manual jobs. Okay, it's different now. I know a lot of people say, well, back in the day we never used to do that. That's because back in the day, you didn't used to sit at a desk for 8 hours emailing, or sit in a car driving, or in a position that you shouldn't, you wouldn't normally be in, at a checkout, whatever your job is. So back in the day, things were different. Things are different now, so we need to move forwards with that and acknowledge that, we are in positions that we wouldn't like to be in. In a triple flex position. If you think about it, the hips, the lumbar spine, and the spine in general, and obviously at the shoulders as well. We're in this kind of rounded up, almost fetal position. We need to do something about that. Readdress the balance. So you need to think about your strength and conditioning and how that, and the work you do on your posture and your stretching, your foam rolling, and all those things. There's not one thing really for injury prevention. It's a think about the wheel, all those spokes coming out to help with that. So hope that helps. Any other questions, bang them below. I'm gonna get on the phone to one of the gentlemen I train in New Zealand, because he's going to be off to work soon, so I need to have a quick chat with him, and then it's out for Mother's Day. Yes. Alrighty. Take it steady. Have a good evening. Bye.